Hello, and welcome to the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Crysler. Each episode, we talk to business leaders and subject matter experts to learn about the challenges they've overcome and the challenges they still face. You'll hear fresh insights, real talk, and get inspiration to grow your business. Hey everybody, thanks for joining another episode of the Everyday Business Problems Podcast. Today I have the honor to welcome Curt Anderson to the show, I think for the first time, which it just blows my mind because we've known each other for so long. So excited to get into this conversation. Curt is the founder of B2B Tale and the author of Stop Being the Best Kept Secret. He spent the majority of his time coaching manufacturers and now training them on how to get found through his digital game plan system, which I'm excited to get into. And he also co-hosts the Manufacturing E-commerce Success Podcast, and he has by his own account great hair. So, Curt, thanks for coming on the show,
hair. Man. It's just shining today, isn't it? How was that?
I love it, man. I'm so excited to get into this conversation with you. And like I said, I'm my mind is just, like blown that we've not done this before today. But I think just to dive in and kind of set the scene, right? Like you wrote the book, Stop Being the Best Kept Secret. Take me to like a manufacturer that you were working with or that you've been in conversation with where that phrase kind of like really hit you.
Yeah, it's so first off, Dave, thank you. What an absolute honor, privilege. So you've been a guest multiple times and it's on our show and it's never enough, dude. It's a masterclass every time I'm with you. So I appreciate you, your friendship as a dad. I just admire you. You know, that expression, iron sharpens iron. I just feel like you make everybody a little more sharp. So thank you.
Thanks,
to answer your question, man. So this is a funny story. So years ago, I was working with this manufacturer. They did massive weldments. So like you think of Navy was a big customer of theirs and that type of thing. So subway portions of like subway cars, that type of thing. Okay. And what was interesting is a client found them online. This was like 10, 15 years ago. Client found them online. Came to visit their facility, multiple football fields at, huge, massive facility. And the guy flew in from Wisconsin to visit their facility here in New York. And the guy was like, man, I was blown away. This was an awesome tour. And he turns to the president and he goes, you know what? He goes, I hate to tell you, I almost didn't come to visit you because your website was so bad. And he was like, if your website's that bad, he goes, I really had low expectations of your facilities. He's like, you're really doing yourself a disservice of what you're showing online compared to like what this place is. And I'm gonna guess it was like probably 2014. And so working with all these different manufacturers, I just kept constantly hearing, oh, we're the best kept secret or best kept secret. I'm like, man, I don't think that's a good marketing strategy. So that's where the Stop Being the Best Kept Secret came from. So.
Man, what a great story. And, I know we've both been in this space for a long time. And I think that phrase certainly resonates with people because, even I've heard it, right? And I'm not, directly in the marketing space. Right. But, I think a lot of people think there's, some air of mystery around it, right? But at the end of the day, all businesses that are growing and or trying to grow, right, are fighting some level of irrelevance, right? So if you can't be found, probably not a great thing for growing your business.
Yeah, right? I couldn't agree. And the thing is with manufacturers is, when you think of like Main Street, take like, the plumber, the service provider, landscaper, everybody that's servicing your home, like they constantly have to hunt. They have they eat what they kill. Right. And so like they're constantly, so back in the day, whether it was like, sponsor the Little League team, or Yellow Page ads, local radio, that type of, and so the thing is like those service providers always had to be in that space of like not being the best kept secret. Manufacturers, they'd land 1, 2, 3, 5 customers and they were set. it'd be like, unfortunately, one or two customers might represent 60% of their business, but they'd go to a trade show, or if sales went down, maybe the owner would hop in the car or jump on the phone. But like, it just was never their jam. They're very humble, very much to themselves, and like that best kept secret, like they wore it as a badge of honor. Like they didn't want people to know what they did. You know what I mean? Until all of a
Yeah.
sudden COVID hits, internet, AI, and all of a sudden, like, okay, now I don't have a choice. I got to stop being the best kept secret.
Yeah. No, and I think, like, as I was prepping for the show, right, like you kind of answered one of the questions that I had in there, and I think it ties to like the stuff that I see from an operations perspective. But it's this idea, right, that we don't set out to necessarily become, like to be the best kept secret, right? It's like it's just kind of happened over time. And to your point about these different iterations, websites, now AI, and just the general umbrella of digital marketing, right? All of that has changed from back when a lot of manufacturing companies, that initial boom, right? Like back in the 80s, let's say, when that kind of initial boom of manufacturing businesses started to be launched, and those early days of growth. So yeah, I think it's spot on in the sense that it happens over time, but if you really want to turn the page, so to speak, right, you have to switch from that kind of being the best kept secret, that reactive mode, into a much more proactive mode, right?
Yeah.
And I think that kind of sets up, like you and I, the last time we connected, we talked about, and you showed me your digital game plan. And so I think it kind of sets up, like, diving into that, and just kind of walking people through, like, how, like, not really how did it come to be, but what are the steps, right? Like, from a high level perspective, what do folks need to do to, shift from that reactive, we're the best kept secret, to starting to get in front of this thing and build out an actual marketing presence?
Yeah, great question. So, just over the years, working with, probably hundreds of manufacturers in some point in time, doing training, and what I found is, like you're saying, best kept secret challenges. And so, when you talk to them, you would, it'd be like, hey, I'm a CNC shop. Well, who do you CNC for? Well, we can do it for everybody. Like, we do circuit boards. We can do it for anyone. We bend metal, we cut steel, whatever it might be. And they just like, well, we can do it for anybody. But when you talk to them long enough, like, you're in Detroit, Michigan area, and, all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, you find out like they're really niche in the auto industry, or they do aerospace, or they, like, we bend metal for, agriculture on Tuesdays. It's like they're so narrow niche that they, until you talk to them, and then we want to focus on, like, what are their core strengths? Where do they exist in the market, as opposed to just trying to be everything to everyone? So that's the first and foremost with that digital game plan process, is like, we focus on, like, we pull out, like, what are their core strengths? A question that we love to ask and they love to answer: how do you make the world a better place? And then, like, oh, well, we have this machinery, this skill set, this engineering, grandpa started the business. They'll go in a deep dive on, like, what they're absolutely best at. And then that's the foundation to get started of, like, okay, now we can go from here. You know what I mean? So that's basically the starting point. And then we're going to slide, and it's like a basic SWOT analysis, right? Then we slide into the opportunities. I'm a huge disciple of your listeners out there. If you haven't read the Blue Ocean Strategy book, came out like in 2005. That's a great book. And so now we start discovering, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, this niche is a phenomenal niche for us. And so now instead of like, hey, we're going to target CNC machining for like a keyword phrase or for search, now it's like CNC machining, or like a particular part that they're making. And so now they have a much greater chance for success than like trying to be like everything to everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yep. No, I love that, because, ultimately, I think the value of folks like us, right, that have been around for a bit, that have worked with a variety of companies, mm-hmm. It's, what I find too on the operations side, right? Folks know what the answers are, but what's challenging is knowing what question to ask. And I think, what you're doing with the digital game plan, product that you developed and just the system in general, right, is what questions to ask. And so if you can get folks talking and you can start to dive in, right? Like if you ask somebody, well, what's your niche? Who's your ICP? Most people are going to struggle with that. They need more bite-sized pieces, right?
Yeah.
And so your ability to ask the right question and then know when to dive in deeper and when to move on, I think that's the superpower of folks that have been around for a bit, because again, when you're so close into it, it can be really challenging to think through at that strategic level that we need, especially from a marketing perspective. To know what to even do with the information that's already in your brain, right? Like you've lived it. So obviously you know it. It's just getting it out of your mind and in the right order so you can actually do something with it.
Well, how you helped me tremendously is, dude, you introduced me to a line, and I think, I don't know if you know where I'm going to go, but you taught me if you have three factors, you know where I'm going. You need to either delegate, you need to automate, or you need to eliminate. Do I have that correct? Right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
I'm telling you, I'm not saying this because we're together. Like you've had a huge impact on like how I approach. So here's a funny thing: we have a thing in our digital game plan. It's called the SO versus the so what. The so stands for strengths and opportunities. And what we do is we kid around. We're like, hey, your traditional SWOT. We're like, hey, when you hang out with us, you have no weaknesses, you have no threats. We're just going to focus on what you're best at. Like, why be negative, right? But we do this thing called the so what. And to me, that is our automate, delegate, automate, eliminate. Yeah. And what we do in the so what section, we call it, what's the strategic subtraction? And so the thing is, I really I kind of shamelessly kind of stole that process from you. And so what we do with our clients, so here's, I'll tie this in with the next step. The next step, I'm a big baseball fan. So we have this exercise called rounding the bases. And what we do is we have our clients put their customers in buckets. So just like kind of like how it sounds like, hey, who are your singles? Hey, singles are great. We deal, Man, who's your doubles? I love our doubles. Then like, who's your customer that you would deem a triple? Then like, who's that home run, that dream game-changing customer? I came up with this like 30 years ago in my 20s. I could tell you exactly who my home run was. Yeah. It took me years. And when we landed, like that was a game changer, right? Here's a perfect example. So there's a contract manufacturer in Illinois that I work with. They have hundreds of customers. When we broke down those buckets, and we use AI to do it, AI took their customers like, okay, here's your home runs. It was like 20 out of 300 and some, like here's your triples, here's your doubles. What they found, 50% of their customers were deemed singles, and it was less than 4% of their business. And so you're talking 150 customers, and they're now questioning, are we making money on any of those 150 customers?
Wow.
And it was
that's incredible, man. That's like, talk about, Pareto, right? Like that, exactly. It's like they're spending 80% of their effort on the 20% of their customers, right, that, don't even move the needle, right? Like, wow, that's incredible. What a great story.
It was powerful, man. And dude, I should have pulled you in. I was thinking about you the whole time. And so now what they're doing is like they're getting laser focused on like, what are the common denominators in those home runs? Yeah. Are there competitors that they can service? Are there other factors? Are there other industries that are similar on those home runs and triples? And then they're really scrutinizing those singles. And they're like, okay, can a single become a double? Do we need to price it differently? Do we need to have minimums? Like, how can we be profitable with the 150 customers? So again, that like it falls into like that strategic subtraction, and exactly what you preach is like, how do you delegate? Can I outsource this to somebody else? Can we automate these processes? Can we be profitable with these singles since we have a relationship? Or, man, God forbid, do we have to eliminate? So anyway, so it really ties in exactly what you preach.
No, I love it not just because it ties into the stuff I talk about, right? But
Right, right.
I think the unlock for most people, right? Like, I was just on a call, and somebody was talking, presenting about culture, right? And I think what ends up happening, right? Culture, marketing,
Mhm, mhm,
operations,
mhm,
right? We
mhm.
we we put these big buckets around things that we know at a very intimate level, and so it feels like intangible, right?
Mhm.
Like you talk about marketing, and folks that aren't marketers are kind of like, I don't know, right? But the way you just broke that down, like now we have some data to look at, right? Now we can start kind of working through, again, moving from that reactivity of, boy, we need to grow, we need more customers, we're not going to be able to sustain, to building a real actionable plan and framework that we can work around, right? Like if you don't know who's driving profitability, if you don't know what products are driving that, if you don't know who you need to be talking to, right? From
Mhm.
like that
Yeah.
that strategic marketing perspective, it's just all a shot in the a shot in the dark. And then you're kind of like, marketing doesn't work for us. It's
Right,
like,
right,
marketing works for everybody, right?
right,
Like,
right, right.
so I think one of the other really cool things that you talk a lot about, and I want to dive into this, is the kind of idea around out teaching the competition.
Mhm.
Because again, I think a lot of people hear stuff like that, right? And the first thing I think is, I don't want to give away the secret sauce that
Yeah,
makes us the best kept secret,
yeah, yeah.
right? So let's dive into that and kind of unpack it for folks, in terms of like what you've seen, how that benefits, folks that really own it, and then maybe even how that plays into the system that you built.
Yeah, phenomenal question. So, 100 years ago, believe it or not, I played football. I played high school football, and we had a legendary coach. Guy won like multiple state titles. Guy, and just like at the time, when you play for a coach, you like, you're not big. I want to say you hate his guts, but like just he pounded.
Right.
Then when you get as an adult, you're like, man, like he helped shape you to an adult, right? And so
Yeah.
he had a line that a lot of manufacturers, they want to keep things to the vest. We have secret sauce that we don't want to share. And I always use this analogy. I'm like, man, our football coach would tell us like we should be able to walk up to the line of scrimmage, look at the guy across the line from us, and tell them exactly what play they're running, and still execute that play to full ability. Otherwise, you didn't work hard enough back in January. You didn't hit the weight room. You didn't do the sprints hard. Like you didn't prepare yourself. And so I don't know. I've used that for years, and sometimes it resonates, sometimes it doesn't. But the thing is, like, I'd rather have a customer know my secret sauce than worry about my competition, unless there's, something proprietary. We don't want to give away
Sure.
like the Coke syrup, recipe, right? But like, the outteach the competition concept is, instead of outspending the competition on advertising, right? Like, hey, we're going to do all the ads, we're going to do Google ads, Facebook, spend, conferences, trade shows, this, that, the other thing, which is fine, right? People you can turn around and do great marketing with those. This concept is like, how do we just be fierce, unapologetic educators and teach our customers our process? Because like you, for example, like, I was a logistics major in college 100 years ago. I get it, streamline that process. But dude, when I talk to you, it's like a masterclass. Like you take it to a new level that I'm not thinking about. So the problem is we take for granted. I can't tell how many customers like, oh, they know what we
Yeah.
do. They know my mother doesn't even know she just said that the other day. She's like, I don't know what you do for a living. I tell everybody, like, just assume that they know nothing. Teach them like
Yeah.
they're in fifth grade, 10 year, like a 10-year-old, and just like give that information out there. What your process, what you do, case studies, how, like I'm being, Captain Obvious here, but just like be that fierce, unapologetic educator, be that trusted guide and consultant, and hold their hand through that buying process. That's part of our digital game plan. Like instead of the buyer journey, nobody wants to buy. Like, do you like spending money? I know, like our wives spend,
Right.
nobody wants to spend money, but everybody wants to be successful. And so the thing is, in the spirit of like dedication to your customer being successful, just out teach the competition, earn their trust, be that trusted advisor and that consultant. And that's kind of the spirit of that. I'll teach the competition.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I think, some of the best lessons, I've learned becoming a marketer, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
we all have to become marketers at some
yeah.
point. But it's this idea that it's like, do the unscalable things, right? And I think that ties into what you're talking about, because sure, everybody wants to scale, you want to grow, but some of that can lean into, not just your differentiation, right? But giving away, like out teaching the competition, right? Like I love kind of, doing things that other people charge for. Why? Because, I've done it for a really long time, and that's part of how I show people value and how I out teach the competition, right? Because, nobody is still going to do it to the level and to the detail, because nobody has my direct experience. Nobody has, my story. And I think that is applicable for every, manufacturing business, really every business that's out there, right? Two machine shops are still totally different, even though they may serve the same industry. Because I guarantee when you get into the weeds of what you were unpacking earlier with who's their, singles, doubles, triples, right, et cetera, it's different. I guarantee it is different, after being in 100 plus businesses at this point. I just know it is. I talk a lot, and have spent a lot of my life in the print industry, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell you without a shadow of a doubt, two printers that say they do the same thing are completely different. Right? Like very rarely are they competing for the exact same business, right? There are differences within there, and some of them are smaller than others, right? But still, there are differences, no doubt. So.
100%. 100%. And so just shamelessly, I'll share a quick story with you that ties in with that. So
Yeah.
Was super blessed, fortunate. I know you're supposed to love every client, just like, you shouldn't have a favorite child. You work, you have a favorite, all your clients. We were blessed and fortunate to be connected with a company in Illinois, and they, the company manufactures dog treats, and every person that manufactures those dog treats, they are differently abled, challenged, physically challenged, that type of thing. I get chills even thinking about just a wonderful, amazing company to work with. Just so blessed. And we did a whole training program with their admin team. So we weren't working with the folks in production. We were working with their admin team and going through this whole market. And marketing they had zero marketing experience, none. And so when we did their singles, doubles, triples, home runs, when you think about like, well, who's my target market for a dog treat? Well, like, hey, everybody owns a dog, well, if you have that mindset, you're going to go broke trying to market to everybody that owns a dog. It's unrealistic, right? What they did is that when they broke down their singles, doubles, triples, home runs, and I love this, they were on Route 66 in Illinois. Okay. Now they had their weekly customers that come, they have a physical storefront, and these customers come in on a weekly basis. They know the dogs by name, the dog, they have these face-to-face relationships. Those were their doubles, people that come in on a regular basis. They felt like they had a good marketing, not taking them for granted, but they had a good marketing system with that double. Their singles, who they wanted to get, there's a lot of tourists that run through Route 66. So they wanted to come up with a marketing initiative for the tourist, the pet parent that's like, hey, we're traveling. Let's, we've got Fido with us. Let's stop by and get a dog treat. Well, that's a different marketing approach than the local who they're seeing on a regular weekly basis. Their triple, they were eagerly trying to create a wholesale distribution line. They had a couple retailers or a couple, distributor opportunities. And they're like, we really feel that we could get growth there. And they deemed those as their triples. Their home run would be like a PetSmart or a brick and mortar. And they're like, you know what? That's down the road. We're not there yet. We don't have the capacity. We don't have the ability. So we know who our home runs are. We're not ready yet. But what they did is we're focusing on our singles, these pet parents that are traveling. And then we want to start attacking the boutique owners who are selling to our doubles. Same end user, but we want to have a wholesale. So what they did, they loved it. They were like, this is awesome because now we know our singles, now we know our triples. That's who we're going after. So it's like when you just really streamline it, it's just like, man, you're just simple. You're making your life so much easier, and we're it's a lower level of complexity to market your business.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I always think about, no matter what the topic ends up being, it's, I can tie it back to like, you know me, right? Like I'm always trying to simplify things because I'm just not that bright, right?
Yeah.
So like I need to keep it straight in my own mind. And,
Yeah.
like what you're saying to me, it's just like, again, it all comes back to that clarity, consistency, and accountability, right? Like
Mhm.
if we know who those singles and doubles are, right? Like, man, pool just completely changes, right? Like now we can have specific, marketing campaigns built around how do we attract more of these, right? We need singles and doubles to grow our business and to kind of build that infrastructure to go out and swing and hit some home runs,
That's right.
right? Like if we don't do that, we can't just go up to the plate and, like
Yeah.
what's the best batting average ever, right?
Right.
Like,
Right. If you know what? Yeah. I'm like, if you like, and I hate to say it in marketing, if like, 2% conversion is like great in marketing. I'm like, if you strike out 900 and, whatever, but and yeah, baseball, if I strike out 7 out of 10 times, I'm a Hall of Famer, if I
right.
strike out 7 out of 10 times, or get out, but hit the other 3, I'm in the Hall of Fame, so yeah, you're making
Yeah.
a great point.
Yeah. Oh man, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk, about the hottest topic, in the world, AI.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I want to talk about really is from your perspective, kind of, search and AI has morphed, right? Whatever we want to call what is happening today. And so what's happening though is, you've got those manufacturing businesses that have maybe struggled in that traditional marketing stretch. Now we've added a whole new element, right? So what do you say to those folks that are, kind of still in those early days? You're working with them on the digital game plan, right? But how that's impacted, like kind of, I don't want to say searchability, right? But like how
Yeah.
people are being found in that scenario.
Yeah, it's crazy. I saw a stat, and I'm like embarrassed to repeat it because I'm like, check the sources, but it's like a staggering number of people are now starting in B2B, are now starting their journey, their buying journey on AI, right? So now
Yeah.
that could be Google, it could be a Google search, Gemini, or whatever the search might be. So it ties. So I'll hit that on a couple fronts. Number one, I feel shamelessly it ties right in with that outteach the competition. I just couldn't
Yeah.
encourage anybody listening. Just and with AI, you can create an enormous amount of content. But what we are adamant about, it's your content. So we call it subject matter expert interviews. So through our digital game plan process, what we're doing is either internal or get your vendors, get customers. I have tons of examples of like, how can you pick a topic that you're so, we call those ICPs, that ideal customer profile. We call them who's your
Yep.
soulmate, right? Like who's a customer that just loves you? They'd be like, man, if Dave went out of business, like I'd be in trouble. Like who's that soulmate customer that needs you as much as you need them? Right. And then getting in that deep dive of like that buyer journey, again, we call it that soulmate success path. What challenges they have. So at the awareness stage, what problems do I have when I start my search? If I'm past that awareness stage, what challenges, what questions am I having in that buying process? Man, just start I know, we could dive deeper in that, but just start producing content around that. You can do a subject matter expert interview. You can talk into your phone. You can talk to a transcription tool. Go in AI, say, hey, could you take this whole and massage it into a prompt, read it thoroughly, make sure that it's like we're dealing with companies that are like they're at 1,000% accuracy. Like we have to put out immaculate content. We're not putting out, just gibberish, that type of thing. Another example I'm going to give real quick is there's a steel manufacturer here in New York outside of Buffalo area. They had been around since the 70s. They're an ESOP, 40 employees, great company. They had zero to little digital marketing. They went all in on this digital game plan process. They're now like full-blown e-commerce, all in. Dude, this is hysterical. So like you and I are Mr. and Mr. LinkedIn, right? I'm all about LinkedIn.
Right.
They had an Instagram account. I'm like, well, you guys are selling steel. I don't know if like what Instagram will do for you. Guess what? They're completely blowing up. Instagram.
Wow.
It's mind blowing. So here's a steel company. They'll take a picture of their steel. on a rack that like, it's like you're walking to Home Depot and like you see steel on a rack. They have like
Right.
hundreds of likes, tons of comments. Man, we need this steel. Like, and it's like raving fan customers that want to buy their steel on Instagram.
That's awesome.
They're not
That's
on
awesome.
LinkedIn. Lastly, I have a CNC guy, literally a 5-person shop. He's Midwest. And, he went through our digital game plan process. And, again, I was like, LinkedIn. He gets on Instagram. What's he blowing up? Instagram. So my answer to you is twofold. Get content out there. Stop being the best kept secret. Like, I'll teach that competition. Secondly, you do an amazing job. If people aren't following you on LinkedIn, they have to follow you. Dude, like your ice cream post recently was just phenomenal. Like, you talk about as a dad, husband, and it's not just business, but then you give like great business tips, and like you're there, just consistency. You're the king of consistency, in my opinion. What these two examples, the CNC shop that I'm sharing and the steel shop, the steel manufacturer, they're just putting themselves out there. Totally out of their comfort zone, something that they've never done in the past, didn't want to do, but they're out teaching and dedicating themselves to information and content and how to help their customer. And secondly, with that Instagram example, I'm kidding around, like how they're blowing it up. They're building community. And that doesn't tie in with AI. You know what I mean? Like they're just doing a phenomenal job of building community. And you're doing the same thing on LinkedIn.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that. And, I think a lot of folks, especially in manufacturing, think, that's not for me. It's, I'm not, selling any. And what is, I wish that I would have had the experiences and learned the things that I did many, many years ago. Right. Because I think to, all the times that I was, running a plant and all the cool stuff that we took for granted in there every day, all the projects, just, even if we couldn't showcase some of the projects, right, from a kind of not sharing that aspect, but just the process, right? People really resonate with that. Back to your point about the community building. And I think the other part to share with folks, right, is like, just start, right? Like if you take yourself too serious and, you're afraid of making mistakes and you're afraid of looking silly, like it's just, we're in a whole new world these days. And so just get out there, post about how expensive ice cream is and, that you're going broke paying for it week after week, right? Like it's just, again, it's people connecting with people. That's the stuff that you're ultimately, that's the underlying lesson, right? And the more you can put yourself out there, the more you can teach people about what you're doing. People resonate with that. And then what the other part that blows my mind specific to content is just how long it lives, right? It's just out there. I mean, I've had posts that get engagement after, months, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's wild. So, why not? Right. That's what I keep saying. Like, why not? So
why not? Or, we're going to sit around and just keep being irrelevant, So yeah, it's not a great alternative. So.
Right. One of the things too I wanted to talk about with you, because I'm curious, if you run into this, but a lot of my time is spent with folks, in manufacturing, kind of helping them to streamline and ultimately be able to kind of, ship what they've already sold, right? Like, so a lot of capacity work, product quality, those types of things. Do you run into a situation where they're not quite ready because they've got some internal challenges? And how do you end up navigating that where ultimately, right? Like whether it's with somebody like me, our good friend Max Krug, right? Like anybody that is helping, they're able to figure it out on their own, at some point, right? And I say earlier than most people realize, you have to turn on the marketing engine, right? Like you have to. But I'm curious if you run into a situation where folks aren't quite, ready to do that yet, and kind of what the advice is for those folks.
Yeah, you know what? It's funny you're saying. So pre-COVID, which sounds like prehistoric times, like in dog years, it was 100 years ago, right? So Pre-COVID, I was working with a contract manufacturer. They'd done no marketing, and again, like if you're a contract manufacturer, like just doing marketing, like there's so few manufacturers doing marketing. It just gives you such a competitive advantage, right? And so I had a client in like 2017-ish, 18, and we turned on the marketing and just went all in, and they weren't ready from the office standpoint. They weren't ready for the influx of RFQs and this, and it became a challenge, and they just didn't have the wherewithal to fix it. And that's another thing. It's like how it's trying to convince the business owner of like, hey, should you do marketing? It's not like it's not like what marketing should you do. It's like, should I do marketing or not? Right. So you're trying to convince them of that. The other challenge is, and maybe I'm almost answering your question with a question is, a lot of times, like, what I find manufacturers, very proud of like legacy systems and processes. This is how we've always done it type thing. And like, they don't want to be told how to do it differently or whatever. So that's another challenge is like, how do we institute, because it seems like they're going to eat an elephant to try to make that transition to, what do you find as far as like, that client that's a little bit resistant or they know they have a problem? How do you get them over the hump?
Yeah, I mean, it's all back to the change management aspect, right? Mm-hmm. So their customers are feeling some pain, right? Whether that's long lead times, poor product quality, right? Like lack of responsiveness, which is just another way to say long lead times, right? So what ultimately ends up being the lever and how I think the dots really connect, right, is one of the things that's so interesting about a lot of the work that I get to do is the speed with which change happens, in the sense of going from, like, I worked with a custom manufacturer out in California, and they were, just to tell the story quickly, right? Like they were experiencing, or their customers were experiencing, like 4 to 6 week lead times, right? Really struggled with kind of a growing backlog. They could kind of never get ahead of themselves on their custom work. And, so working together over the course of about, 2 months, give or take, we're basically able to go from that 4 to 6 weeks to 5 to 10 days. Wow. Right. And so what's really interesting about that, though, right, is we didn't add resources, right? Like that wasn't new equipment. We didn't hire people. They actually lost a couple of people through some natural attrition. And so, technically we were down 2 people in manufacturing, but, we increased capacity significantly. And what was interesting about that company, was we needed the marketing engine to get turned on and activated far earlier in the process, right? So what happens in my mind is like there's this natural teeter-totter effect. So if they're bringing somebody in like me because they're struggling with, that responsiveness or, lead times or, backlog continues to grow, once we kind of get the engine moving, right? Like, we're very quick to say, like, you need to be talking to Curt. We need to be getting this marketing stuff rolling here because, we need more work to come into the system, right? Like we're going to increase your capacity by 20, 30, 50, 100%. And if you don't have more work coming in, right, like you're going to have a different problem, than you've kind of ever had before. We're going to run your people out of work, and people are going to be standing around saying, like, why don't we have more business coming in? So it's going to feel like you're failing, right? Even though you've actually dominated all of your traditional KPIs, right? Like it's really wild.
Dude, that is so phenomenal. And you and I talked recently, and if you don't mind me sharing, like, you've got some new efficiencies that you're taking advantage of with AI. We're like, so even like pre-AI, which again sounds prehistoric, like, you're bringing people 10, 20, 30 per, again, like 100% capacity. Now with AI, now it's going to get really crazy, right? Of like this insane capacity opportunities of efficiency, right?
Yeah. I mean, it from my perspective, right, it gets back to what I said earlier. I think the value of folks like us is just our lens of experience, right? Like I don't have any, vast differences other than I've been into a lot of places. I've had the opportunity to solve lots of problems and I've had lots of conversations. Right. And so that's what has grown my lens of experience. And I would make the same argument for you. And so that's the value, right? It's ultimately comes across as knowledge transfer, right? But that's the value of having been in and around and doing this for a variety of people, and making the mistakes, right? Like that's so, the advent of AI, right? Now you have the ability to kind of leverage that knowledge in a much more approachable and kind of scalable way that we didn't have the ability to do even 6 months, 2 years ago. Yeah. Right. So that's the mind blowing part. And that's why I love what you built and showed me, because I think the ability for a manufacturer to, sign up with that tool, work with you, go through this process. I think the worst case outcome is they know more about their business, right? That's worst case outcome, right? That's and who doesn't want that, right? Like who doesn't want a different perspective on the thing that they've, grown up in, or their second generation, right? Like all of those things. So I think that part of it's amazing. One of the, and like we might have to schedule like a part 2. I know we always get so into, going through this stuff, but like one of the things that I love to talk about, I started this a little bit earlier this year because back to your, so what, right? Like I love that because it's just, Curt, this is great information, so what?
It's like who cares? Like my mom doesn't even care, right. So what's so special about that? Yeah.
Yeah. But the way I like to tie it together, right, is like, what do we do, tomorrow morning, right? What do we do on Monday, right? Like all my stuff I put out generally on the weekend. So it's like Monday morning, what are you going to do walking into the office that's different, right? So that's the question. What can somebody do tomorrow, right? This afternoon, they're hearing this, they're juiced up. It's like, I gotta freaking do this stuff, right? Yeah. Like, what do they do? What's step one?
Yeah, dude, we didn't even plan this. So what's funny when we do so we call it the so versus the so what? Like, what are you absolutely best at? How do you make the world a better place? What are those incredible opportunities? And we really dive deep, like to pull that out. Like, yes, this is a great opportunity. We should go after this market, this, and this ties in perfect, right? Then when we pull in that so what, like, hey, what are the profit killers? What are the energy suckers? What are the time wasters, right? And that's your expertise. And then I say like, okay, now what? And so this ties in exactly perfectly with what you're asking. Okay, like, well, hey, that's great. Now what do I do? Okay. And so if anybody out there listening, I'm always the starting point is that strengths. Like get a clear, concise. I'm a mission statement junkie, like that one sentence, few word war cry. Like, you're in the famous elevator pitch type thing. If you like, I talked to somebody last week, they have the new product, who's your market, pretty broad, this person, that market, so on and so forth. Man, I just couldn't encourage that person that listening, the first step, I have a brag party. Everything that you do, phenomenal, dive into it. And that's profitable. That's realistic that you can dive into. And like, how can you start exploiting that? Okay. That is my absolute first step. And then who needs that product? Who needs that solution that you offer? Who's that soulmate that's sitting out there? Man, I wish Dave would come out and like teach me how to delegate, automate, and eliminate, right? Like find that soulmate customer. Start with your core strengths and opportunities. Start eliminating that strategic subtraction, dive into who's that ICP, that soulmate customer. That's where I would start first.
Yeah, I love it, man. I think, so often we kind of talk about, assessments or tools or all of the things. And, I know all of that stuff is available. The book is available, right? But sometimes the best medicine is literally, grabbing a notepad, a pen and paper, and just kind of diving in, right? And getting some stuff on paper, doing that brainstorming, but really, really starting to identify, that sweet spot of opportunity. Because again, I think over time, right? It's like I talk about that default system, right? It's just like over time, it's the death by 1,000 cuts. It's, every day is the fire. So I'm just worn down at this point, right? But at some point, there was a ton of energy. There was a ton of focus, right? It got you from where you were at to where, kind of where you're at today. And so getting re-energized around that, and again, just putting a little bit of pen to paper, obviously reaching out, to yourself, taking a look at what you've built and how you can ultimately help folks with it. For anybody that wants to reach out, Curt, where's the best place for them to find you at?
Well, I hang out with you on LinkedIn. So Curt Anderson on LinkedIn. Name of my business is B2B Tail. It's a little play on words. Instead of retail, it's B2B Tail. And, the last thing I'll share is like, talk to a customer, talk to that soulmate that like you really made a difference for. That's, you were just saying like how you wish you did, if you ever felt you did something different. Unfortunately, we weren't doing a great job of like getting customer testimonials. We're like relentlessly getting customer testimonials. And what's great, it's like, it's here. And I asked them, I'm like, what could we have done different? What could we have done better? But what did you love? Like what moved the needle? And it really talked to your customers. And like, we literally now have like dozens and dozens of video clip testimonials from our customers. We're creating case study success stories out of it. But it's really selfishly, it's for me to understand like who is my soulmate and how can I stay in my lane and just keep relentlessly helping that type of customer over and over. So that would be my last piece of advice. Talk to a customer, man. Just talk to a customer.
Yeah, all amazing advice. And the other thing I love, right? It's always practical. Sometimes I think this stuff, both for people that are evaluating, right? It's kind of like you might look at the price tag of some of it and try to work out whatever that return on investment is. But, that nugget alone, right? What does that cost you? An hour of your time, right? Like, and you should be reaching out to your customers anyway. Right? So,
I'm like, we did one this morning. My call after you was it's like, why did I do this ages? And the thing is, they are so, when you give 110%, they are eagerly like they're raving fans back. Like, thank you for making a difference. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing. And for the customers that aren't the raving fan, that I want to give them 110%. Shame on me on like, it's a great learning experience. And how can I do better? How can I do better for the next person? Yeah. So it's just a great opportunity. Just get that two-way communication going. And I know I'm Captain Obvious with some of these tips, but man, this could be a game changer for our friends out there. So.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's Captain Obvious at all. I think it's back to the, the teaching ability, right? It's like, if you're not out there sharing the things that ultimately we kind of deem as maybe simple, right? Like it's simple, not easy. And so I think having those reminders and getting that stuff in front of folks. And again, I go back, like, we don't have some secret sauce, right? Like there's nothing secret about it. It's the secret is the simplicity. The secret is in the execution, the consistency with which you're going to show up, right? Like, that's the secret. I just spilled the beans, like it's just, come on, but again, what makes it valuable is the fact that you've seen it over and over, dozens and dozens of companies, right? That you've been in, working through this very specific process, getting them, back to that clarity, consistency and accountability. That's the thing. So if you spend 30 years doing this, you're going to end up in the same place. You're going to learn similar lessons, right? So that's the secret. That's the shortcut. That's why you listen to a couple old crusty guys up here talking about this stuff, right?
And we can wrap up on this, dude. I vividly remember the first time I met you. You and I were on a panel together. And when we were on that panel, like, you just started talking and I'm just like, whoa. I'm like, I need to get a piece of this guy because like he's just dropping brilliance and wisdom. It was with our mutual friend, Gail. I don't know if you remember it. It was during COVID, which was 100 years ago. And dude, I cannot express my gratitude to you, my appreciation. I value you as a friend. Unfortunately, we haven't met in person. That needs to be a top priority. We need to meet in person. I just appreciate everything that you do. So thank you, man.
Yeah, man. Well, feeling is mutual. We'll definitely get something on the radar since I have, an East Coast customer. So I got to make it happen sooner than later. So, Curt, man, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Look forward to the next one. And let's make sure it's not, like another 6 years or something.
That's right. That's right. So thank you, Dave. Appreciate you, man.
Cool, man. Thanks. Thank you so much for listening today. If we brought you any value, please rate, subscribe, and share our podcast. Also, be sure to connect with us on social media by searching @The Crysler Club. Until next week, I'm your host, Dave Crysler.